Alright fellas, as well as the brutal tank knockout last weekend, we also had the co-main of David Benavidez versus Oleksandr Gvozdyk, and well, for Benavidez, it didn't go exactly as planned. Gvozdyk put up a harder challenge than we all thought and pushed Benavidez further than expected. So today I want to talk about this fight, what happened, and what this means for future bouts, as well as what we could see for Benavidez in the future, that maybe being Canelo, Bivol, or something else. So let's get right into it. The build up to this fight was obviously very Benavidez centric. I think a lot of people saw this fight and thought Gvozdyk was a pushover. He's old, washed up, and has no chance. To summarize what I said in my last video, Gvozdyk was an Olympic champion who previously held the WBC light heavyweight strap, and did so through defeating a long-time champion in Adonis Stevenson. His last bout before retiring in 2020 was Beterbiev, where he pushed him further than anyone previously had. Since then, in 2023, he made a comeback and had a couple of fights which put him on the road for the Benavidez fight. I think many people, including myself, were quick to jump on what's next for Benavidez rather than recognizing the challenge in front of him. What didn't help the overlooking was Gvozdyk talking about how he was beaten by Benavidez in sparring. Yet once people saw the sort of shape he was in at the weigh-ins, they started to go, oh, this might be more of a challenge than we first thought. And what we got from the fight was an incredibly lackluster performance from Benavidez. We saw very few instances of his signature style and power, and saw him fade off the later it got into the fight. Most of Benavidez's success came in the first half of the fight. He had a lot of success with that looping left hook, which was working effectively, as well as some of those relentless body shots, which was some of his best work in the fight, pressuring Gvozdyk to fight on the back foot. Yet he didn't take it easy on Benavidez, and Benavidez took some decent shots, with Gvozdyk launching a bit of a comeback in the latter rounds, but really it was too little too late. This was Benavidez's first fight at the heavier weight, and well, he hit Gvozdyk with some of his heavier shots and they didn't really make a dint. Known for his knockout power, he cruised to that unanimous decision victory, unable to put Gvozdyk down. Alongside this, Benavidez in the post-press conference talked about how the heavier lads are obviously punching a lot harder, and yes, he was able to withstand a 37-year-old, basically semi-retired Gvozdyk, but how would it go against a generational talent like Bivol or a puncher like Beterbiev? It is important to note though that after Benavidez fought, in the post-presser he did reveal that he suffered a facial cut and a torn tendon in his right hand before the fight that would have impacted his performance. Yet although his right hand might have bothered him, I don't think it's an excuse for him gassing out the way he did later into the fight. He did mention it was only a 6-week training camp, which I thought was a short camp for such a long way to move up, and could have been the reason he wasn't in perfect shape. Yet alongside this, if he struggled to keep the foot on the gas for 12 against Gvozdyk, in which he allowed Gvozdyk to attempt to launch a comeback, what happens against any of the top boys that put on relentless pressure, that Benavidez can't get out of there in the first half of the fight? Well, that's a good question, and he might find some trouble. So naturally, after asking such questions, I want to talk what could be next for Benavidez. Now, the first option, which was on the lips of both the press and Benavidez at the post-presser, was obviously Canelo. What I found interesting in this presser was the enthusiasm from Benavidez at the idea of moving back down to 168. This is the fight that the fans want, as well as Benavidez. The only party which doesn't want this fight is Canelo. Although after this last fight, I think that this fight is the closest it's ever been to happening. But do I think this is going to happen next? Probably not. I'd be pretty surprised if it did, but you look at some of the factors surrounding it. Benavidez didn't look as sharp in this last bout, which I'm sure Canelo is watching. This bout also showed how Benavidez is becoming a star on his own and definitely draws out both the press and the fans. Nowhere near the star power of Canelo, yet he's significantly more popular compared to Canelo's other mandatories in William Skull. Yet once again, it looks like the WBC won't push for this bout and won't enforce mandatories. The Saudis also don't look very interested in this potential bout, but what are they interested in? Well, I would say it'd be Bivol versus Benavidez. That, I think, is the more likely big fight that Benavidez will end up getting. Depending on if there is a rematch or not in the Bivol-Beterbiev fight, I think there could be some time in between now and a potential matchup for all the belts. So in the meantime, I think Benavidez could end up in a fight against, say, Callum Smith or Malik Zanad. Though out of all the potential matchups Benavidez could get, he definitely still wants that Canelo matchup. It's clear he prefers to be at 168 and would prefer to stay there. Yet if he can't really cement his legacy in that division because the right fights aren't happening, he will be forced to move up, and that's currently happening. I think on the Canelo debate, it's also allied to the Mayweather debate of he took so many fights against fighters that people called for that he doesn't need to take the Benavidez fight. And I agree, if he doesn't want to take the Benavidez fight, then vacate the belts. It's not like Benavidez is a new challenger which no one has heard of and people are all of a sudden calling for him to face. He's been the #1 challenger for years now and has beaten pretty much everyone there is to beat in the division. If beating everyone he really needs to beat in the division isn't enough to put him in the position to challenge for all the belts, then I don't know what is. And if Canelo doesn't want the smoke and wants to withhold the belts fighting fighters like William Skull, he simply needs to vacate and stop withholding chances for a fighter who rightly deserves it. Personally, I'm more of a Canelo fan, but you look at his last 4 fights in Golovkin 3, Ryder, Charlo and Munguia, in all instances Benavidez is more deserving of a shot. No one wanted to see fights like Jamel Charlo versus Canelo, and simply it didn't make much sense, although he did earn the belts rightly himself, and of course as the champ you have the right to decide what to do next. But mandatories are there for a reason, and even as a fan I think it gets to the point where you're like, what's the point of holding the belts if you want to duck the real challenge? I like the people getting frustrated at Fury for ducking Usyk for a long time. It's nothing against what he's done or against himself as a person, it's just if you think he's done enough at the top level and doesn't need the Benavidez fight for his legacy, which in Riley he might not, then why does he want to keep hoarding the belts if he's not going to challenge the best? But that's just my 2 cents. And anyway guys, I want to hear now what you thought about the Benavidez fight last weekend, and what's your thoughts on what's next for Benavidez and the ever rumoured Canelo fight. But just quickly, if this is your first time watching one of these videos, my name is Cloyster and I make boxing content to help keep you updated and informed, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider liking or subscribing. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one.